Hey, how's it going, guys? Mr. Boss for the win here, and in today's Red Dead Redemption 2 video, we're going to be talking about what really happened to Mary Linton after you beat the game. So where does she go in the epilogue, and why don't we ever hear from her again, and will we ever see her again? So to give you guys some background before we can jump into this, Mary Linton, or Mary Gillis, in her youth was in a romantic relationship with Arthur Morgan, and the two were deeply in love. But it ultimately fell through due to Arthur's life as an outlaw and his affiliation with the Vanderlyn gang, leading to the prevalent disappointment of her family as a result, particularly her father, Mr. Gillis. Now, after that happened, Mary eventually married Barry Linton and took on his surname. But Barry later passed away after contracting pneumonia, leaving her a widow. And as this happened, her family began to grow more and more dysfunctional. And that's where the story sort of picks up in Red Dead Redemption 2, where Mary essentially asks Arthur for his help getting back Jamie. Now, in the Horseshoe Overlook chapter, Mary contacts Arthur for the first time in many years. She pleads for his help convincing Jamie to leave the Chelonians, but Arthur is apprehensive due to his poor relations with the Gillis family, but admits that he was at least on good terms with Jamie. In fact, this is the very first letter she writes to Arthur. She says, "Dear Arthur, I've written this letter 100 times or more and I cannot get it right. It's me. You know it's me from the bad handwriting. I know I said when we last spoke and I was going off to get married that we would not speak again. I know I said a lot of things and I meant them. I suppose at the time, but I am not so proud as to not speak to people who care for me or cared for me. I've been in Valentine for a couple of months. I had some bad luck and well, it's a long story and not an interesting one. But I am here for now. I saw a couple of girls, or whatever the polite term is for them, that ran with you and your associates in town, and I heard tell of a man who sounded like you. I would love to see you again if you could spare me a little bit of your time. I'm renting a room at Chadwick Farm just north of Valentine. Yours, Mary Linton." So that last line is important. A lot of you guys have said, well, Mary Linton probably just returned to her home in Valentine. Well, that's not the case because that's not her home. Chadwick Farm, she was just renting a room there. In case you guys remember that cutscene, Mary doesn't answer the door. It's someone else. So she's renting a room there. So after the epilogue, she doesn't ultimately return to Valentine. That doesn't happen. Now, after that, the final time in which we actually see Mary is in chapter 4, so in 1899, where essentially she asks for Arthur's help with her father, and she'll actually write him another letter that says this. It says, "My dear Arthur, I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to thank you for your help with Jamie. He and Daddy are still arguing, but I understand that Jamie is thinking about going back to college. Whatever happens, I believe you have saved his life, and we are all truly grateful. Oh, Arthur, I have made such a mess of my life time and again. Why can I not change and be the woman I want to be? Why couldn't you change and be the man and put down all these fantasies that shroud your judgment? Life is very confusing, and I see now that I am not very good at it. I am afraid we have gotten ourselves into another mess. It's not my fault, but I need your help. I'm staying at the Hotel Grand in Saint Denis. Oh, Arthur, I know it's wrong of you to ask, but I have nobody else, and for what we once had together, I beg of you, even though I am ashamed to do so." So we actually get some important details here. The first thing is actually about Jamie and not necessarily Mary, and I guess we can switch gears for a little bit and talk about Jamie. What happens to Jamie Gillis? Well, as you guys know, you actually have the opportunity to save Jamie Gillis from joining the Chelonians. So I guess Jamie's story can go one of two ways. If you don't save him from joining the Chelonian cult, I guess he just becomes a member of the Chelonians, and that's it. And you just assume that's the life he ultimately lives. However, if you do choose to save him, it turns out that he has likely gone back to college. So you can only assume that in 1907, about 8 years after the game takes place, that Jamie is likely done with college, is probably 4 or 5 years older, and is probably living a very normal life. Now, it's actually hinted at in the one mission in which you see Jamie that he likes apples and was thinking about working on an apple orchard. So I'm just putting 2 and 2 together here. Maybe if he gets a college education, likes apples, maybe he starts his own apple farm, plantation, orchard. Whatever the case is, That's the only thing I can think of, but it makes sense. So that's what I'm going to assume has happened to Jamie Gillis, that he is college educated and likes apples. So he's probably working on an apple farm or something along those lines. However, getting back to Mary, we get more details on her. She went from living in Valentine to Saint Denis, so it's pretty clear that her family just sort of like moves around. And I think that gives us some details for what we can expect after the game. I think it's fair to say that she would likely just continue to move around. Wherever her father goes or wherever she goes on her journey, she's just going to go along with the flow. It doesn't seem as if she has one like stable home. So that's important right there. Now, the final time we actually hear from Mary is a goodbye letter that Mary gives us in chapter 6, where she says, "My dear Arthur, you never showed up, and now after looking at the newspapers, I understand why. I don't imagine you will receive this letter, but I nonetheless must send it. Arthur, oh Arthur, I was just starting to dream the silliest and softest of dreams. I miss you and will always miss you, but I cannot live like that. And it seems you cannot live any other way. When I am with you, the world makes sense, but when we are apart, I see clearly that your world is not a world from which one can escape. I am so sorry for everything long ago, and for starting up that business again. There's a good man within you, Arthur, but he is wrestling with a giant, and the giant wins time and again. You've broken my heart again, and I fear I have broken yours. For that, I will never forgive myself, but you must let me go now. I enclose a ring that you gave me many years ago when we were both young, not because I don't like it, but because I care for it too much, and it reminds me too much of you. I hope one day you will find some people in love who can use this, for it kept me thinking of you all these years, and I hope by returning it, I can finally be free. Goodbye, Mary." Now, that last line is important because Arthur and Mary's relationship kind of like live on forever, I guess you could say, because that eventually becomes the ring that John Marston gives to Abigail. So it does sort of live on, but that technically is the end of the saga right there. Mary officially saying goodbye. Now, aside from those letters, Arthur will also write in his journal about Mary Linton, about the times that she has written to him and the times that he has seen her. So in chapter 4, he says this: "Mary wrote to me, wants to see me again. Oh, Mary, what fools we are, what a fool I am." That's the first time that he writes about her in chapter 4. And then after he meets her in chapter 4, he will say, "Saw Mary and the awful daddy, who was taken to drink, which unsurprisingly ain't improved him a whole lot. What a foul pig he is, taken to hawking off family heirlooms and cursing the world for it is. Still a stuck-up son of a bitch. Now Mr. Linton has passed away. I wonder what he wants for his daughter. Funny thing is, I love her and yet am a bad lot. Old daddy is a good, upright man, and yet he treats his daughter like a possession to be mistreated and abused as he sees fit. Strange creatures, men, I don't know. All I know is that I love her, and she both loves and detests me. It never worked before, and it won't ever work now. Yet it grows at me. The idea of it gnaws at me like a sickness. I've got to give up all that nonsense. I'm an outlaw, a murderer, a man with a code, different to ordinary folk, and Mary ain't ever going to be for my world." So that's what we hear from her in chapter 4. And then, of course, in chapter 6, after the goodbye letter, Arthur says, "Got a letter from Mary. What did I expect? What did I want? We weren't never meant to be and never really was. And yet somehow in the end, I discovered I had a heart because it was broken. Oh, you fool, you sad, deluded fool, torn in two by different ideas of who you were. And it turns out you weren't neither of them." So that's what Arthur will actually say in his journal. Now, getting back to Mr. Gillis a little bit, and I guess we can now transition to the final time which we see Mary and Mr. Gillis, and that is in the credit cutscenes of the game. So we first see Mary, who actually visits Arthur's grave. And she actually visits, she's wearing all black, she's mourning, she's crying. So she clearly knows that Arthur has passed away. We don't know how long it was from the point Arthur died to when Charles returned to bury Arthur, but you can only imagine it was maybe days, weeks, months. Certainly not like a couple of years. Let's just say that. So we know at least for some time after the story in 1899, she is still within the 5 states because she comes to visit Arthur's grave. And then we also see what happens to Mr. Gillis. We know that Mr. Gillis somehow made his way to New Austin and died at the edge of Coots Chapel just outside of Armadillo. So we know the fate 100% of Mr. Gillis, But we still don't know 100% the fate of Mary and Jamie. And I think those are the two big important characters here. Now let's talk about Mary, since we've already kind of established what I think happened to Jamie. So I think because Mary visited Arthur's grave, that obviously officially closes the chapter that they had. So I can only imagine that she continued to move around the world. Maybe she remarried. I can only assume that, within 8 years, maybe she found someone else to love or something like that. Maybe she's gone off in a completely other direction. Now, the reason we don't hear from her in the epilogue clearly is because she doesn't have any relationship with John Marston, so there would have really been no need for that. I mean, we see the ring that she gave back to Arthur that John ends up using on Abigail, but that's about it. The only way in which I think we would get more backstory on Mary, Jamie, and Mr. Gillis is if Rockstar did a single-player DLC for Red Dead Redemption 2 that sort of tells the story of life before the game starts. So like pre-1899. That would be a perfect opportunity for Rockstar to explore the timeline when Arthur and Mary were like super in love and where they were thinking about getting married, and how he taught Jamie to ride horses and all that good stuff, and his relationship, or not so good of a relationship, with Mr. Gillis. So all of that, in my opinion, sounds really cool to explore, but unless Rockstar decides that's the direction they're going to go, I don't think we will ever hear or see from Jamie, Mary, or Mr. Gillis again. But anyways, that right there is what really happened to Mary Linton and the entire Gillis family after Red Dead Redemption 2. Hopefully this gave you some more clarity on what happened to them. And again, hopefully Rockstar is watching, listening, and knows that we want to see more backstory of this. So please give us a single player DLC. That would be amazing. But anyways, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts, opinions, and more on this entire saga and more. If you did go on to enjoy this video, though, a like rating would, of course, be awesome. And subscribe to my YouTube channel if you are new or you like daily Red Dead Redemption 2 videos like this. With that out of the way, guys, like I said, thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next video.